This video is brought to you by Surfshark. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they're providing to the entire Upper Echelon community. All right, let me start this off by setting a sort of tone. I very much wanted this game to be good. I tremendously wanted to enjoy this product for multiple reasons, but the most important one is because this game was directly inspired by Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which was by far one of my favorite games ever played. See, Black Flag did so many things right, it effectively inspired a brand new AAA endeavor from Ubisoft, which had me extremely excited from the get-go. I was at E3 2018, which had a playable demo of the game for 30 minutes where we had a PvP match, and I continued to follow its development cycle for, 5 years afterward. Now, I'm telling you this because when I criticize this game, I want people to know that I'm not sitting here grinning. I don't relish the fact that this game is objectively bad, because I'm disappointed at what could have been. I'm disappointed that the studio behind Assassin's Creed Black Flag, while everyone pointed at their fantastic prior examples saying, more of that please, basically took 10 years to make something not even half as good. And I'm mostly just confused at how exactly we ended up here. With all that said, I review games for what they are, not what they will be, not what they could have been, and not what I wish they were, because this is the product we have right now and it needs to be judged for what it is. Skull and Bones is a ship-centered open-world looting game, kind of. You're a pirate, you captain a ship, and you get in battles, find treasure, and run a smuggling empire of sorts. Rum, tobacco, and opium, basically. You can briefly set foot on land periodically in order to get quests, engage with vendors, or dig things up from time to time, but there's no melee combat, no boarding enemy ships, no island looting. There is only ship combat. I have no earthly idea how a publisher took nearly a decade of people saying they wanted more Black Flag and made this. It is, quite frankly, baffling to me. Sadly, it's a live service. It has a fraction of the core gameplay experience that you might expect from a pirate game. And while I did have fun for a while, there certainly are redeeming qualities here, which I'll discuss. I just don't understand some of the creative choices, and I probably never will. Let's begin by talking about story. You start as a grunt, eventually you become a pirate kingpin. That's the story. I won't spoil the details or the missions, but it's forgettable to say the very least, and essentially comes down to your interactions with a couple central pirate lord figureheads. Fun at times, yes. Gripping and or interesting to a degree where I can recommend the game as a result of it? No. The game is, at its core, a naval combat simulator, where pretty much every single thing you ever do is sail a ship, punctuated with little bits of running and some dialogue. As a result, any review of this title will have to be relatively simplistic, because the game itself is fundamentally simplistic. There's a decent number of different ships, which are fun to get and interesting to play with till you get the next one, up until I realized something. These ships are very clearly archetype templates, probably left over from when the game was PvP-centric, and they each have a designated purpose. One of them can heal, one of them has better damage of different types, fire, etc., etc. But the issue there is that once you get even a few hours in, you'll just never use the early ships ever again, because a better version was made available to you that simply cannot be ignored. Why? Well, because ships have a set number of weapon and furniture slots, which are basically the stuff you'll be trying to grind for, ultimately, weapons and furniture that make you stronger in battle. See, what it really boils down to is that some ships have 3 weapon slots or 2 furniture slots, etc., and some have 5. This, combined with how power scaling works, means that you are extremely unlikely to revisit older ship types ever, even though the game still very much has this phantom remnant of a prior system where the ships were clearly designed to be sort of like classes: tank, DPS, healer. In my opinion, it's emblematic of a wider pattern where the game just doesn't know what it wants to be. All right, now it is briefly time for me to talk about a service that I even go so far as to advertise in my free time, which is Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN, a virtual private network, and VPNs help protect you from a pretty vast array of online issues. Nothing in cybersecurity is ever perfect, mind you. That's not how the industry functions, but Surfshark protects against certain types of phishing attacks, malware, DNS tunneling, DDoS attacks in particular, and also combats what is now persistently invasive big tech data harvesting as well as tracking. If you care more about the world of entertainment, Surfshark unlocks additional content on streaming websites, such as Netflix, for example. You can easily change your region, therefore enjoying additional options in your video library as a result of geo-gating licensing agreements. Surfshark gets around regional censorship, such as the government deciding to block things, which they shouldn't. And Surfshark also offers encryption, IP protection, modification, and more. I say this in every single segment now for a very specific reason. Surfshark operates completely separate infrastructure from NordVPN, and Surfshark also maintains a warrant canary. I won't use or endorse a VPN that doesn't. If If you click the link down below using promo code Echelon, you can take advantage of a special community-wide offer with up to 3 months for free. Again, that's promo code Echelon with the link down below for a community-wide special offer. Big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring the channel. This pattern where Skull and Bones doesn't know what it wants to be is a bit difficult to explain, really, so maybe this will help. For a game where the entire experience revolves around sailing the open seas, one might expect that the functionality of sailing would be carefully crafted or deeply considered. Well, if one expected such a thing, one would be very wrong, because sailing genuinely feels like a chore as soon as you get even just a few hours deep. Let's use wind as an example here. Wind is a core feature, or should be, because you're operating a boat with sails as its primary propulsion mechanism. The strength of the wind, the direction of the wind, the way you sail as a result of that wind, all of that should be important, right? Theoretically, yeah, with me? No, wrong. Wind in Skull and Bones is only a nuisance. You can sail directly into it, just a bit slower, or alter the heading even slightly and go back up to near optimal speeds. It's certainly frustrating when it's blowing directly into your face and you're trying to get somewhere with sluggish controls as a result, sure, but it changes so frequently you will almost never be altering your tactics in any measurable way whatsoever as a result of the wind in a game where the only meaningful content is sailing. I'm not sure how to describe it best, but I'll give it a shot. It feels like they didn't want to lean into the actual idea of pirate naval combat, because any semblance of realism here would mean you can't just go wherever you want, whenever you want. Or if you did, you'd have to use tacking, which is a legitimate sailing maneuver to fight the wind, or something like that. However, instead of just going full arcade mode and making it so you can press the key and have the boat respond to that command regardless of what's happening with the wind, they decided to still try and have wind be a thing, making it this demented hybrid system where you can just sail the boat whichever way you want all the time. You just have horribly sluggish controls sometimes, and you go slower as a result. It's not like there's prevailing wind patterns on a communicated schedule either, which would make it so you could, I don't know, something like do a pickup route at a certain time of day to catch the favorable directions. No. It's basically random, and half the time NPC ships don't seem to even care about it. To be fair, some people may consider that small, but one of the primary endgame mission types is a delivery format where you can't fast travel, leading to these really long voyages where you just sail from one side of the map to the other, annoyed when the wind isn't favorable, maybe, but otherwise just ignoring it completely. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever in a pirate-era naval game. Now, speaking of sluggish controls, which would make sense if it were a load-bearing pillar of the gameplay due to realism or something like that, basically all of the important endgame content, which you'll get to rather quickly, pops up on timers. This means you have like 5 minutes to get from where you are at any given point in time to where the event starts, which means you're racing to get there, battling against controls that feel horribly and painfully sluggish to respond, in a game that was very clearly designed to not have the actual slow pace of realism. The entire thing is a mindfuck of why did they do this? That might seem harsh, I get it, but let me just put this in perspective. One of the more interesting activities in the entire game is called investigations. These are cool, I like them, honestly I do, and it's refreshing to not have a yellow dotted line take me directly to and from every single objective like I'm a toddler. Investigations require you to read things or interpret something based on context clues, and they're honestly pretty good, mostly, till you get to something like this. This is an investigation where the tooltip literally tells me the captain sailed towards north of the open seas. Yeah, except the text in the logbook says something else, and the item you actually need is on the other side of the map, nowhere near the open seas or north of them. Sloppy is an understatement. But before you go thinking that all I have to say is negative, here's some things I actually did like. You can pin a recipe to your map, which helps tremendously while gathering resources, and this is a very resource-intensive game where you'll be gathering a lot of different types. There's a doubling feature for the endgame seasonal currency, which was super cool when I first discovered it. You basically get the option to gather up all of your pieces of 8 from the manufacturing sites and go to a set location to double them, but if you die along the way, you lose them, and there's a deceptively large amount of things to do once you become a kingpin that feel genuinely rewarding. If you like the game enough to grind it over the duration of a season, you're probably going to be happy. For my part, I got to Kingpin, I got a bunch of the manufacturing sites, I got my ship to the maximum strength level, which is 11 right now, but I did that without any of the best weapons, which was confusing, and I started to compete in the endgame heists, which I could solo. The convoys, the legendary treasure maps, etc., etc. I basically did everything. I had fun. I hunted the ghost ship, I killed the sea monster, but I started to realize just how skewed and sloppy the construction is overall. A lot of the resource quests you get, you just instantly have them completed because the commodities in your warehouse are global, which means you accept and turn in quests right away, which is obviously not how it was intended when half the game content loop is built on you having to physically go and sail places. After killing a sea monster, a hard hitting enemy that took a while at like level 6 or 7 power for your ship, I got rewards that were lower than a level 1 quest from the same NPC. Who balanced this? And when you look at blueprints from vendors, a lot of them said things like requires Corsair or Brigand 1 in order to unlock. Corsair 1, as in what? A leftover fragment of a ranking system where Corsair had subranks to it? It's just like a disjointed mess. Remember, the endgame content loop consists of picking things up and physically sailing them all the way home or to whatever target they're supposed to reach, as well as rushing over to a set location to compete with other players for a prize. But while rushing to and from different places, my Z and my F keys on my keyboard bugged out multiple times, meaning I couldn't get off the island I was on and missed whatever I was trying to get to, whatever that event was. Z is what you press to get back to the dock, and F is to interact, so I couldn't interact with the boat to go to the dock or go to the dock screen itself, and I got stuck till I restarted my entire game. For what it's worth, the process of getting more pieces of 8 and building your smuggling empire once you become a pirate kingpin is interesting, kind of, but it's also a wasted opportunity. This is a pirate game. Why couldn't you have PvP servers where every time you have pieces of 8 on you, you can be openly attacked or attack others, or some form of higher stakes empire management and building instead of always having it feel just safe? Here's a different way to phrase it. Anything even remotely similar to your level, it just dies in a couple of hits very easily. Sure, that might sound fun, the power fantasy of it all, but when there's this 5-pronged damage system, flooding, piercing, fire, tearing, etc., it trivializes the combat loop. If the fights were more tactical and difficult instead of blatantly arcadey, I might feel the need to maximize flooding damage and synchronize loadouts with other players, but as it stands, I don't feel that need because I'm maximum ship rank without any of the actual endgame guns and easily destroying anything I come across, even soloing the group content. And that's not because I'm a particularly talented player either, don't get it twisted. It's because the game is easy. It's actually bewildering to me. It took them 10 years to make something where the only mechanism of organic resource farming without combat is a click on the green bar minigame, where you don't even leave the ship. It's a pirate game with absolutely zero swashbuckling. And the funniest thing of all, not really, but kind of funny, you get a bunch of the core gathering tool blueprints just randomly by mail. It's hilarious because you get these resource tools despite literally never needing to gather resources by hand. It is objectively slower and worse in every single conceivable way to gather them by hand and play the little mini game compared to just sinking 1 or 2 low-level ships that you see, which emphasizes how tacked on the entire system is. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. You could play the entire game never once crafting or leveling up your sickle, pickaxe, and your saw, which were randomly delivered to you by mail in yet another example of how this game feels totally disjointed. That whole collection of systems was probably left over from when it was intended to be a survival game, partly on land, I guess, which it was, right before it got redesigned for the umpteenth time, eventually becoming what we see now, which is baffling mediocrity. Again, there are elements here that can be fun. There are systems in place that actually surprised me and made me interested to see where they go with it. But I can't help but feel disappointment when I remember that this is Ubisoft. They made Black Flag, and all of us pointed at it and said, holy shit, more of that, it's amazing. What do they do in response? They spend 10 years redesigning, then releasing something where the best parts of Black Flag are nowhere to be seen. And yeah, if they add base building and more PvP and a lot more ship archetypes with a good amount of additional weaponry and furniture items, yeah, then it might be deserving of a purchase maybe. But right now you're buying a disjointed and stitched together Frankenstein's monster of a game that repeatedly bounced between studios and pinballed across different genres or concept versions so many times that the confusion contained in its final form is quite literally palpable. Skull and Bones is supreme only in its mediocrity, and while there is fun to be had and the visual customization on the ships is pretty cool for a while, it just doesn't feel like it's a cohesive, intentional game. It's more like a haphazardly constructed final version of the homework that was due at midnight, final deadline, no more rewrites allowed by the teacher, where the students got it done at like 11:59 p.m. by smashing together all of their previous versions to meet the length requirement without thinking about how they actually fit together. Even the map is cut off weird. I guess it might fill in over the course of the next few seasons they have, but when I look at it, all I see is confusion. It's certainly a game, but it's not a good one, and it makes me sad. It's a sad face out of 10. That's it. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links down below, primarily locals and Patreon. I'm hoping to have those become the main funding stream for the entire channel and maybe take it ad-free if that happens, but these are just ideas at this point. Also, the video sponsor, of course, big thank you to them and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, question everything and have a nice night.